Good morning, students. Today I am going to finish this poem, Ode to the West Wind by P.B. Shelley. The other day we could do only the first three stanzas, and two stanzas are still remaining, the fourth one and the fifth one. So, if you recall, I did tell you that the poem is written in terza rima and it has got 5 stanzas. The first 3 stanzas they describe what the west wind as a power of nature is doing on earth, in the sky and in the ocean. And now the poet comes back to himself in the 4th stanza, and the 5th stanza is one of prophecy. So the 4th stanza begins like this: If I were a dead leaf thou mightest bear, if I were a swift cloud to fly with thee, a wave to pent beneath thy power and share the impulse of thy strength, only less frail than thou, O uncontrollable, if even I were as in my boyhood and could be the comrade of thy wanderings over heaven, as then went to outstrip thy sky speed, scarce seemed a vision, I would never have striven as thus with thee in prayer in my soul need. O lift me as a wave, a leaf, a cloud, I fall upon the thorns of life, I prayed. So, after giving you the description of what the wind has been doing on earth, in the sky and in the ocean, the poet comes to himself and he tells you, he rather addresses this west wind, wild west wind, and he, while addressing the west wind, tells us, if I were a dead leaf thou mightest bear. He is addressing the west wind and he says that if at all it is possible that you could lift me up and carry me along with your wanderings over earth, in the sky and in the ocean. If I were a dead leaf, you would certainly have taken me along with yourself, and I would have been roaming throughout the world. If I were a dead leaf, thou mightest bear a swift cloud to fly with thee, or a wave to pent beneath thy power, the wave of the ocean. If the poet simply imagines, if at all it is possible to be a leaf or a cloud or a wave of the ocean for a human being, but that is not possible. It is not possible. If I were a dead leaf, thou mightest bear. If I were a swift cloud to fly with thee, a wave to pant beneath thy power, and share the impulse of thy strength, the west wind. He is using the word thy for the west wind. So, O west wind, you are so powerful. If I could be a partner, a companion of your wanderings over earth, in the sky and in the ocean, had it been possible, but it is not. The impulse of this strength only less frail than thou. Certainly, I am not that powerful, I am not that frail as you are, because you can move around, you can go anywhere you like, you can do whatever you feel like. The impulse of this strength only less frail than thou. O uncontrollable. The wind is just as the most uncontrollable thing, because nobody, neither human beings nor any living being or even gods, cannot control this west wind. So, O uncontrollable, if even I were as in my boyhood. The poet recalls his past days when he was at the prime of his life, when he was young, energetic, enthusiastic, full of energy, at that time, if those days, if those times could be reverted, if they could come back to him, if even I were as in my boyhood and could be the comrade of the wanderings over heaven as then. Because if he had been young enough, he had been energetic enough as he used to be once when he was in the prime of his life, then certainly he would have been a comrade in the wanderings of this west wind over heaven. He would have felt himself swayed by the wind itself, a comrade of the wanderings over heaven, as then when to outstrip the sky's speed scarce the same division, then certainly to compete with your uncontrollable speed would not have been a vision for me. This is what the poet says. The comrade of the wanderings over heaven, as then went to outstrip the sky's speed scarce same division. I would never have striven, then certainly I would never have prayed as I am doing now. I would never have invoked or exhorted you as I am doing now, because now I am weak, frail, and not that powerful, not that full of strength as I used to be once. I would never have striven as thus with thee in prayer in my sore need. The poet feels that he needs the help and support of the west wind for the spread of his message, for the spread of his philosophy of life, as thus with thee in prayer in my sore need. Oh, lift me as a wave, a leaf, a cloud. And now he, addressing the west wind, exhorts us, asks her, requests her to lift him as a wave, a leaf, a cloud, as she has lifted the leaves from the ground, as she has swayed the clouds in the sky, or as she has committed commotion, she has done some sort of commotion in the waves. In the same way, the poet says that I too am a dead leaf, or a wandering cloud, or a falling billow, and therefore he requests the west wind to lift him as a wave, a leaf, a cloud. I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed. Very pathetic line, in the sense that the poet is self-pitying. He is pitying his own situation and plight and lot. I fall upon the thorns of life. To him, life has been a road of thorns, full of thorns, not roses. I fall upon the thorns of life. I bleed. So, this bleeding is not physical. It is intellectual, it is emotional. Somewhere Shelley had this belief that he was misunderstood by his contemporaries, and therefore a sense of loneliness, helplessness overpowers him. And he says, I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed. A heavy weight of ours has chained and bowed. Certainly the times are such that they have chained, they have almost caged me, they have put chains around me. A heavy weight of ours has chained and bowed, one too like they, tameless, swift and proud. They have chained, the times are so callous, the world is so callous that the poet feels chained and down with those chains. One too like they. And this world and these times, they have chained a person who was like the west wind itself. Once upon a time, he was like the west wind, tameless, swift and proud. As the wind is tameless, nobody can control it. Earlier he has used the word uncontrollable, and now he uses another word, tameless. Nobody can tame it, can domesticate it. And swift and proud as the west wind is, there was a time, the poet recalls to himself, there was a time when he used to be like the west wind itself when he was in the prime of his life. So this was the fourth stanza. Now we come to the fifth stanza of the poem, the last one, which is one of the masterpieces of poems by Shelley. In the poems of Shelley, the fifth stanza is a song of empathy. It is said that most of the poems of Shelley, nature poems of Shelley, are the songs of empathy. He empathizes, he tries to be one with nature and the powers of nature. And therefore, the fifth stanza begins like this: make me thy lyre, even as the forest is. What if my leaves are falling like its own? The tumult of thy mighty harmonies will take from both a deep autumnal tone. Sweet though in sadness, be thou split fierce, be thou me, impetuous one. Drive my dead thoughts over the universe like withered leaves to quicken a new birth, and by the incantation of this word, scatter us from an unextinguished hearth. Ashes and sparks, my words among mankind. If winter comes, can spring be far behind? He beseeches the west wind, he prays to the west wind, make me thy lyre, even as the forest is. Lyre is a musical instrument. He says to the west wind, O west wind, make me your lyre, your musical instrument, as the jungle, the woods, they are your instrument. You blow through them and they make sweet sounds, they create music. In the same way, make me thy lyre, even as the forest is. What if my leaves are falling like its own? I too am like a forest with the leaves falling, the autumnal forest when the leaves are falling down. The earth saying, what if my leaves are falling like its own? The tumult of thy mighty harmonies. So when you blow through me, O west wind, there would be a tumult of mighty harmonies. Music would be created, mighty music would be created, will take from both a deep autumnal tone. The poet compares himself with the jungle in autumn, and he says that when you blow through the jungle, or when you would blow through me, there would come out an autumnal tone, some autumnal song from both. Sweet though in sadness, it would be very sweet, but it would be full of agony, full of sadness. Be thou split fierce, be thou me, impetuous one. Now this is the most perfect line for empathy, where the poet becomes one or wishes to be one with nature, with the power of nature, the west wind itself. Be thou split fierce, my spirit, be thou me. I become you, you become me, we are one up. So this is what the poet wishes. Be thou me, impetuous one, impetuous, proud one, drive my dead thoughts over the universe. And he says, he requests the west wind to carry his thoughts and ideas, his philosophy of life throughout the universe, like withered leaves to quicken a new birth. As the west wind carries away the dead leaves, in the same way, the poet wishes her to carry away his dead thoughts, and by the incantation of this word, scatter. And through this verse, through this particular poem, Ode to the West Wind, the poet asks the west wind to scatter the message, to convey the message throughout mankind, to the whole world, the message of his philosophy. Ashes in his past, my words among mankind. And what that ultimate philosophy is? If winter comes, can spring be far behind? That if the times are callous, if the world is merciless, well, there is still hope for a better world to usher in, for a better dawn to be heralded, when there would be liberty, equality, and fraternity, when there would be some golden age. Remember, Shelley is one of those romantic poets who does not escape to the past, he rather escapes to the future. And for him, the golden age is not something pertaining to the past, but it is pertaining to the future, when the world would be a blissful place, everybody would be happy, would be satisfied, would be at peace. So that is the world, that is a vision which the poet had about mankind, and this is the message which he wishes the west wind to convey throughout the world, throughout mankind, that if winter comes, can spring be far behind? So the poem ends on a note of utter hope, not only for the poet, but for the whole of mankind. A great poem written by a great poet, Ode to the West Wind. This is how I finish my discussion of the poem. Thank you.